Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Mama Muthoni, mommy to 1-year-old Muthoni, and apart from being a mommy and a wife, I'm also a businesswoman with the brand name African Kaya. Today we'll be talking about the breastfeeding strike, why a child would be refusing to breastfeed, how to get them back on, and mistakes that maybe you did or that we could do as moms that would lead to our babies not breastfeeding. Yeah, so let's get started. As I said in the earlier video, the video that I posted last week, breastfeeding is not a straightforward journey. There's ups, then there's downs, and that's not something that I was expecting. So what is a breastfeeding strike? A breastfeeding strike is when your baby suddenly refuses to breastfeed, and sometimes the reason is known, sometimes the reason is not known, or rather you can't really come to the bottom of it, which is what happened with me when Muthoni was around between 10 and 12 weeks old. Um, So it's important to note that children don't self-wean, or rather babies don't self-wean before they're around 18 months old. That's what research says. It's not me, it's science. I didn't do the research. And anything before the 18 months normally is caused by something. And normally it's something that can be resolved. Causes for a breastfeeding strike could be illness, could be teething, could be the nipple. Maybe you're not having enough milk. It could be that you're bottle feeding and the baby is confused, has nipple confusion. Could be a pacifier, again, that can cause nipple confusion. There's quite an array of reasons. But also, like I said, sometimes you just can't get to the bottom of it. A breastfeeding strike can be very emotional and frustrating for both mom and baby. And it's a playtime when sometimes you feel like the mom as if you're failing your baby, because basically your primary job as a mom, especially to a newborn, is to nourish this child and take care of this child. And if you're failing in half that role, or rather that's how I felt, you feel like you're failing in half of that role, which now for me was feeding, it gets very frustrating and you keep asking yourself so many questions. And for me, like I said, Muthoni stopped breastfeeding when she was about 10 to 12 weeks. I don't remember exactly when. I had actually just taken her for the 10-week jab, so maybe it was 11 or 12 weeks. I taken her for the 10-week jab. I decided to take her to a missionary hospital where I paid 20 bob. Everyone thought I was crazy, but after that, everything went haywire, and my husband was so convinced that it's because of the 20 shilling jab. That's why all these other things happened. Like, she had issues with her sleep, she had issues with, like, there's so many problems. So it's very emotional, and I think also for the baby, sometimes they get very frustrated because now, if you as a mom you're frustrated, of course your baby will be frustrated. Here you are as a mother trying to force your child to breastfeed. You're trying to put the boob in their mouth. You're trying to force open their mouth, and they just will not budge. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I made, because the more you push and the more you get frustrated, the more your child gets frustrated and the more they pull away. So do not do that. Don't do what I did. And I know that's normally the first thing that as a mom you feel like doing. Don't do that. Just be consistent in trying to offer the breast to your baby. Be persistent, be consistent, but don't get frustrated, and do not force. Do not keep your baby hungry, hoping that at some point, once they're hungry enough, they're going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Once they're hungry enough, they're going to breastfeed. Don't do that, because again, a very hungry child is a very frustrated child, and once a child is very frustrated, they're bound not to probably feed, and they're not going to feed from the source which they really do not feel like feeding. So offer the boob often, but don't make it like an emergency. Like, if the baby does not breastfeed, it's not the end of the world, and don't feel like it's the end of the world. And I know it's very easy to feel like that. That's how I used to feel. And actually, I used to ask myself, no, as in I want to breastfeed for 2 years, my baby is stopping at 10 weeks. What is this life now? And I remember also at 10 weeks, I really used to ask myself whether I have the stamina and the discipline to exclusively pump for my baby until she was 6 months. And I just kept telling myself, I don't think that it was something that I wanted, but I also knew that I didn't want to formula feed my baby. At this point, I'll put a disclaimer. If you decide to formula feed your baby, it's quite okay. Breast is best, but fed is also best. So if for some reason you cannot breastfeed or you do not want to breastfeed, it's okay. But for us, or like for me, who chooses to breastfeed, I did not want to give my baby formula. For me, that is not the route I wanted to go to. I have explained to you how, in the other video, how breast milk is specifically formulated for your baby and not for my baby or for anybody else, like the way formula is, and it's not the route that I wanted to go. Don't force your baby to eat. Don't keep your baby hungry. Try and put your baby on your breast often. And by often, I mean, like, for me, I used to feed every 3 hours. So now I had to put her on my breast like every 30 minutes and just offer her the boob. Sometimes it's also easier to actually feed your baby when they're asleep. which is called a dream feed, or when they're just waking up or when they're just falling asleep. It's a trick. Sometimes it will work, your baby will take, and sometimes after they take a couple of times during sleep, they'll take when they're awake. But also that could fail because it could lead to you now being forced to only feed them when they're asleep. But it's worth a try to keep them feeding. So if the baby refuses a breast, offer a bottle. I said in the other video, offer a bottle when your baby is 4 weeks. Don't wait until your baby is 10 or 12 weeks because it will get frustrating for both you and your child. Between 4 and 6 weeks, introduce a bottle. I said also in the other video, as you introduce a bottle, make sure it's size 0, size 1 nipple, and don't use anything larger than that. And even if your pediatrician tells you to up your size as the baby grows, don't do that. The work of a pediatrician is to give you medical advice. That is not medical advice. That is actually very wrong advice. Use a size 0 or 1 because it's very hard for a baby to get milk from your breast. Like, they work very hard to extract milk. When you give them a bottle, even if it's a size 0 bottle, it's very easy for them to get the milk from the nipple of the bottle. And if you give them one that has a fast flow, it's very easy for them to reject the bottle. I'll talk about that more later, still on this video. I'm reading my notes. So first thing to do is to try and resolve the issue, depending on whether or not there's an issue. So you can check the baby's gums. If the gums are swollen, then just know that it's teething. You can give them a teething toy. You can give them a cold carrot. Then try and resolve that, because teething also makes it really hard for them to suck. And then at that point, you can try and give them milk using a cup or a spoon. You can spoon feed them. I never got to do that with my baby, but I hear it works. If it's illness, just ride it out. If maybe the baby has thrush, also now just ride it out. If there's no reason like that, for me with Muthoni when she was 10 or 12 weeks, I didn't find the reason as to why she was refusing the breast. So what I chose to do is to do lots of skin to skin. I stayed home in bed for around 3 days. I'll post a photo of that. So that was just 3 days, me top half naked, her basically naked. All she had was a diaper, and then I would just hold her most of the time. Good thing at that age, they are still not hyper enough or moving around enough to give you a problem with that. So I did that day 1, and each time the baby would wake up, the point of that is each time the baby wakes up, they just find a breast on their face. And she'd still refuse. And I did that day 1, day 2. That means basically I took most of her naps with her, or rather I spent most of the day and also took most of her naps with her. Sometimes I'd get bored, so when she naps, I'd put her down, and because she was already on a program, I'll talk about the program, I think 2 or 3 videos from now. She was already on a program, so I knew exactly when she would wake up. So just before waking up time, I'd put her on my breast so that she can at least wake up and find it there. But basically all I did for those 3 days is just stay in bed with her, or stay in the sitting room with her watching TV. As I was watching TV, and I was just holding her so that she could smell me, smell my milk, and just be familiar with me during that time. By the 3rd day now, she was already taking the breast milk. I think the first thing I actually started doing is taking milk now just before she woke up, because now if she was supposed to wake up, say her morning nap would end at 10. So like at 9:50, I would put her on the breast and she would breastfeed. And same as the 2:31. And then now by day 4, now she would breastfeed now when she woke up, because I used to breastfeed after she wakes up, not just before bed. Also, don't forget that each time that the baby feeds, you need to express milk, because it's very important for you to maintain your supply. It's very easy, it's very quick for your supply to dip during this time. So each time she'd feed, I would express that milk and then put it away, and then now that would be the milk that I'd feed her with, or maybe feed her from the stash, because we already had a really large stash by then. Then at 4 months, she had issues with distraction. So that one finished. That was at 10 to 12 weeks. It finished, it ended. She got back on the breast and it worked fine. So you can try that skin to skin. So I've said skin to skin, I've said bottle feed or spoon feed, and just don't force the child to take breast. At 4 months, we had issues now with the distraction. Any single sound, as in even the drop of a pin, Muthoni would stop breastfeeding. And how I solved that is now I'd have to go to her room. And sometimes actually a very dark room. Her room already had blackout blinds by then, like it was totally dark, and I would breastfeed her there. And then now when I realized it was just any movement in my house, like I would announce before I start breastfeeding, and nobody was really allowed to move around. And I know it's a very big problem when a child gets to around 4 months, because now they are more aware of their environment. And basically the only way to solve it is just to reduce the amount of distractions. At 6 months, no, actually at 5, let's say 5.5, because I traveled when my baby was 3 months. I left her with my mom. I said that I think in the other video. I left her with enough milk for that time. At 5 months, I also had to travel to Germany for an entrepreneurship course. I left her with milk. And then when I came back, I noticed that Muthoni had issues with breastfeeding. And that was also now again really hard for me. Because again, like I said, I'd really hoped to breastfeed until she was at least 2 years. And to give her just breast milk without cow milk, without formula, without anything until she was a year. So again, when she started refusing breast milk, I just could not understand. But unfortunately, I also did not have the stamina that I had before now to do the skin to skin. And she was also very active, really. I was just not about that life. So what I decided to do now at that point, again, I didn't force her to take breast milk. I just used to give her my stash. I was too lazy to breastfeed. At that point, my supply went down, shoop, like it was so low. I said in the other video about pumping that at some point I used to pump 270 ml a day. Imagine, at that time my baby was taking about 800 to 1000 ml a day. It was really bad. But I got that back up. But now later when I thought about the reason why she stopped breastfeeding, I realized that at some point, she used to use 0 to 1 nipple. And then at some point, my husband told me, oh, so we moved to size 2 so she can take more milk. I knew that was a wrong decision, but only a small baby, and my hubby really had issues with her weight. Like, he felt like he should be heavier, but she was really small, and I was also a very underweight baby. But look at me now. Anyway, so we went to a size 2, and then early August, my husband said, so we moved to a size 3 so she takes more milk. Again, I knew that was not the right decision. But he convinced me, and we started using the size 3 nipple just before I traveled. So we started using the size 3 nipple, and then I traveled, and then coming back, Muthoni is not about that life of trying so hard to get milk. And that's exactly how she stopped breastfeeding. That's why I keep telling you, do not change your nipple size if you plan to breastfeed. Like, that information is all over the internet, and I knew it, and I don't know why I changed my mind. But I think it's because I only used to give her 1 bottle a day, so I didn't imagine that it was going to affect her in any way. But it did because I had traveled. So with that, that is when I started exclusively pumping. I pumped until she was 1 year, and then I started giving her cow milk. So I started exclusively pumping. So the day I started exclusively pumping, I actually had 4 packs of milk in my freezer. I'm pointing as if you guys can see my freezer. I had 4 packs of milk in my freezer, and I just had to start pumping. And pumping worked. Actually, sorry, I didn't talk about it in the previous video. I'll talk about it in next week's video. How I went from 270 ml pumping per day to 1200 ml per day. And what my journey was like with exclusively pumping, and what my experience was, that I'll talk about next week. So how long did your baby breastfeed for? What was your journey like during the breastfeeding and stopping them to breastfeed? I know that's another big issue, winning the baby out of your breast. I know it's another issue that moms really want to talk about. So let's hear what your journey was like. Comment on the section below. Give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you share the video as well. And whichever way you decide to feed your baby, whether your baby refused breast milk at 3 months and you were not able, or you didn't know that you could get them back on, or if the baby is 3 years and you're still breastfeeding, just remember, you're doing great, mama. So see you next time, guys. Bye.